The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the hosts and guests as individuals, and do not necessarily reflect those of advertisers or sponsors. This show is intended as entertainment and commentary only. The producers strive for verisimilitude, but nothing said on this podcast should be taken as fact by the listener or viewer without performing due diligence.
That existence, the physical universe, is basically playful. There is no necessity for it whatsoever. It isn't going anywhere. That is to say, it doesn't have some destination that it ought to arrive at.
This is Keep Your Hat On, a show by three nerdy nobodies and one nerdy kind of somebody about nothing in particular. Keep Your Hat On is brought to you by the Narrowband Broadcast Network, NBBN. The focus is on you. By PodSquadPDX.com, painless podcasting. And by the kind support of KYHO fans everywhere via Patreon. Patreon. Create on your own terms. On this episode, Andrew gets defensive. Chris gets swanky. Robert gets prohibitive. And Dr. Mark gets the hell out of town. All that plus bonus bagpipes. I'm your announcer, Michael Brumage, and here are your four hat men of the alpacalypse. God, really? Anyway, here's Andrew, Robert, Dr. Mark, and in the purple gown, Ziclis.
And hello and welcome back. This is Keep Your Hat On, the show where hell, even we don't know where we're going to go. I'm Andrew Scott, along with my good friends, Christopher Vacano and Robert Anthony. And speaking of not knowing where we're going, Dr. Mark Peterson, live remote from Door County, Wisconsin. Beautiful Door County. How's everybody doing so far this week?
Awesome.
Yeah, you are going to be awesome being in Door County. Oh God, what I would do to suddenly teleport next to you.
Yeah, I'd kind of rather be there than here.
I'm trying to come up with if we've got a version of Door County in Oregon.
Yeah, what is that comparison? What does that look like?
Door County is lovely, soft, rolling hills, lots of water because you're sandwiched in between a bunch of lovely things in Door County. And it's, I don't know, Mark, is it touristy still?
Oh my God, yes. I'm afraid so.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry, back in the echo chamber.
Yeah, we're fine with that.
With a weed whacker just decided to do something next door. So I'll go back outside in a minute.
Yeah. Mark is dealing with competitive mowing outside his current facility.
Well, Wisconsin is all about the lawn. You have to remember.
Yeah, I know. We don't have that luxury here. We're still bone dry and painful to walk on. But I think, honestly, in Oregon, our closest to Door County might be Hood River. And of course, many of our places out by the coasts where you can get, fresh pulled saltwater taffy and stuff like that.
Every state has one, right?
Oh, yeah.
So like I accidentally discovered in Indiana, it's a place called Nashville, Indiana.
Oh, I've been there. Yeah. Nashville is weird, wacky fun.
Yeah, that's actually where the site of the Ukulele World Congress, by the way, which is how I discovered it. But it's like
that is interesting. Yeah, it's very interesting.
And I think, every state has that like little boutique-y, in Massachusetts, it's the Cape Cod.
Right.
And Provincetown. Mm-hmm. And, but I don't know. So Oregon, probably Hood River.
Yeah. Hood River is one of our big, and that's the one that's really most easily accessible to Portland Metro, where people go to just go for a little while. It's only about an hour and some away from us.
So what about Washington? Would it be like Sequim or Whidbey Island or something like that?
Whidbey's a good candidate. I would say most of the Puget Sound is all dotted with. Chris can speak better to that since he lived up in Seattle for quite a while.
Huh.
Yeah, I've got no firsthand experience with Door County, but yeah, out on the peninsula is really pretty nice.
There's also the Columbia Gorge.
Of course, yeah, pretty much.
As you move inland, it gets higher and drier and hotter, but the gorge is really pretty.
Yeah,
and just beautiful.
And once again, from when we were talking last time, a lot of people, when you think big rivers in the United States, you immediately go to the Mississippi and the Missouri. And people don't have a real good grasp for the gorge out here and the Columbia River.
That's a big freaking river. That sucker goes a long way.
How massively significant it is.
Roll on Columbia, exactly right. And the gorge itself is underrepresented in our popular consciousness, because a lot of the gorge, as Chris was just saying, is in places where the population is sparse. It's dry as dry can be, and there's just not a lot of traffic. I think probably one of the other more notable things that we have is the Snake River. And that's, everybody in our generation immediately thinks of a rocket falling into
Evel Knievel.
Exactly.
It was a bad day.
It was a bad day.
Bad day. That guy had a few bad days.
Yeah, he had a bad day for every single broken bone in his body.
Yeah. When you can roll on the pavement and manage to break pretty
much everything. I think including his skull at one point. Which, yeah. So
we need a podcast about that whole thing.
Oh, by the way. Oh man, 70s Daredevils. Sure. Yeah. Let's put that on the calendar.
Yeah. Oh, and I remember the big plans for him to jump the Grand Canyon.
Yeah, and they had to reduce the Grand Canyon into the Snake River Canyon simply because physics.
That's crazy.
And then that worked out well.
Yeah, right, exactly. Well, the
Grand Canyon would have worked out way better.
Our best to Evel Knievel and his family, and of course, that family is just filled with tragedy. But again, I guess I don't. I'll put in a little fact thing underneath here because I'm not doing due diligence.
I know Robbie's still around,
but their family has pretty much been beset with tragedy, which you can't be really surprised by, considering that your main form of earning money is hurtling your body at or over things. But well, listen, everybody, we are having a lovely time here. The weather in Oregon has finally settled down. And
we're getting some nice cloud cover that looks like it might actually build into.
Don't say the R word. Don't say it. Don't say the R word.
Good.
Does anybody know? And I haven't checked. Is this cover that we've got?
How much of it's smoke powered?
No. How? I mean, I know that New York is actually.
Yeah, I was just going to bring up the East Coast is now starting to get.
We had it here.
Oh, did you guys really?
Yeah. Yesterday. Yeah, it was smoky all the way down.
That weird, it winds up being a very particularly weird shade of like pink and gray together. Yeah. And when the sun hits it, it does weird stuff with the light.
We've been getting, this stuff has come from Manitoba, we were told, and not from British Columbia.
Yeah, but part of that is, as far as I understand, too, being the resident weather nerd, is that because of some of the disturbances right around the national border, there's some weird stuff happening with the standard flows of air and part of the jet stream where it's grabbing stuff. Our biggest fire right here, right now, Rob, is it?
It's the boot.
Oh, bootleg. Excuse me. I got the wrong B.
And it is huge.
It is massive. I will show it to you right here. They're able to see it from the International Space Station. And that's some footage that I saw this morning. It is.
I just wonder whether this cloud cover is actually reaching over there, because they could really use it.
Oh, God knows they could.
I had heard Eastern Oregon is getting even better cloud cover.
Yeah,
that's great.
And just something, something to drop the ambient temperature. So that,
and with the humidity in the air, you can get some relative humidity.
I like relative humility. Actually, I'm going to be keeping that one.
Humility.
What happens is the fire sits down and is a little bit. I mean, a lot of people don't understand, but fire can create its own weather. When it gets that big, the tornadoes are one thing, but when you get that smoke that high in the air and those ashes, it creates its own weather.
All that particulate matter up there in tiny little bits running into each other creates static charge. It can precipitate moisture out of the air above it, which drives a cyclonic effect. and winds up essentially vacuuming up clean air from below it, which actually increases the vacuum effect of the fire, including the heat below. And it's just this mad cyclone.
You get this really convection thing happening when it starts ripping.
Yeah. And again, from everybody here at KYHO, if you're fire support or firefighters out there doing your job, thanks so much. You know, we had a small grass brush fire, I should say, I'm sorry, off of, 84, and that they wound up having to pretty much throw everything within reach at to get it to beat down, because that was dangerously close to the metro area again. But as it stands right now, most of our wildfires are in our southeast and south central. Down there was one by Salem that got stomped on. But yeah, it's still a little bit dicey here. But other than that, the weather has been pretty decent. And my God, now we're devolving into chatting about the weather. Sorry, people.
It's happened. It's finally happened.
Exactly right. So you got a theory about?
I got a theory about this weather thing. Is for years now, if you've watched local news, right, on your local TV news, it usually turns into. So about 10 years ago, I saw this one news report this was in Milwaukee. And there had just been a major city council meeting about a whole new budget initiative to bring jobs and all the rest of this. But the lead stories on the local news that night were a little girl whose class had shaved their heads in support of her leukemia treatments.
Oh,
nice.
All right.
A really sexy police chase helicopter film from L.A. Good video.
Didn't include a white Ford Bronco, did it?
It wasn't that one.
It wasn't that one? Okay.
But there was a crash in it. And then, I'm not making this up, a fireman rescuing a cat from a tree. I'm totally serious.
Did the cat have a bow on? The cat had a bow on, right?
What? So, and I'd never done this before, but I called the station and I said,
citizen activist.
Can I talk to the news director? Hello? I said, so I'm going to be the picky viewer, but let me just ask this. We had a major thing happen in City Hall tonight, and your opening coverage, or this afternoon, and your opening coverage was a car chase from Los Angeles, a fireman rescuing a cat, and a little girl with leukemia. Is that right? And the guy literally goes, "We stand by our editorial decisions." Click.
That's the best. That's the best film we had.
Well, let me finish this up. I'll just get to the end of this. Sorry about all this setup.
That's all right.
So I started thinking about this. It's like, okay, so what if we took this guy seriously? If that's true, the only important part of the news is the weather report, right? And I got to thinking about this, and it's like the weather people on TV channels are they're like our shaman.
Yeah.
Right? They prognosticate the future. They read the auguries of time and space, right? And they're not always right, but they're still our shaman. And it's like, and they're the ones who they dress in goofy costumes, or they wear this. The guy wearing the bow tie in the old days, right? And now we have these young women who are actually much more serious than the old idiot guys used to.
You noticed that, did you?
They have been, yeah. It's actually kind of a relief. I'm going to tell you,
right?
Because it's like, a professional now. But I got to thinking about this shaman thing as weather reporters, and it's occurred to me, it's like people always say that people talk about the weather because it's not important, right? That's the reason why it's safe to talk about the weather.
No, it's totally the opposite.
I think it's the opposite.
Yeah.
I think that's the reason we talk about the weather is because that's what matters. And politics and religion and sex,
that's what wins. And I think you're totally right in that with the shamanic model. You're right, because you've got the affable, knowable fool, and that's your weather guy. Yeah. And then you also have the fact that the weather is the only thing on the news that not only directly affects you, but it's the only actionable item on the news that they give you because it's the only thing that you can personally do something about, whether or not it's take an umbrella, wear a different coat. It actually empowers the viewer in a way that no other aspect of a news broadcast does.
Okay, I'm going to get really geeky about this since you brought this one point up.
Go.
So Jürgen Habermas, who is this ancient German philosopher, he's like in his 90s now.
Is he still around?
I know. And he's not liked, but I love this guy.
Testament to German living.
One of the things he said was that our modern technology for information exchange, TV, radio, the movies, and so on, have cultivated in our society a sense that we're merely spectators, and that our politics used to be about action, but now our politics are about being spectators.
Yep.
And so I love this idea that the weather is the only actionable part of the news in which you can actually go do something, like bring an umbrella.
I got really kind of upset this week when the national, and I'm not going to say which one, national news prime time gives all of about 30 seconds to the fire situation nationally. And go straight to flying phallics in space.
Yeah, let's take a couple minutes to talk about
what the fuck. I mean, let's ignore the crisis climate and let's pay attention to a shit ton of rocket fuel that's being put into the atmosphere and making things worse.
Well, I'm going to say a couple things about that, being that I am also the resident space nerd. I understand where people, and of course, for those of you who are under a rock, the big news of the past 10 days or so has been two obscenely rich people flinging themselves up into space for a few minutes.
Three. There's a race between three. It's Musk, Bezos, and
yeah, but I'm not speaking. I take Musk out of that because Musk isn't putting himself up in the air. I'm talking about the race between Bezos and Richard Branson, because really their goals are more concurrent with each other than Musk is. And to argue and put too fine a point on it, Musk's main aim for SpaceX has been a commercial support for American interests in space. Bezos and Branson simply want to be able to put tourists up for a bit of weightlessness over the Kármán line, which is...
Well, and I get even a bit more cynical about this, that their real purpose, particularly Bezos and Branson, is self-aggrandizement. It's legacy building.
That might be to some degree, but how I look at it is this. America lost the financial will to really pursue a strength in suborbital space or orbital space right around the time of the Challenger disaster. They realized, people in power realized that they were losing the ability to point to the science that comes from the space program as a rationalization to their constituents that they should be spending this much money. Now, I always have a problem with this much money, because if you look at the amount of money spent from Mercury and Gemini on, it is a fraction of what we have spent in so many other pursuits like, nation building and invading countries that we had no business being in.
Giving tax breaks to billionaires so they can build their own spacecraft.
Now, I have no argument. I have no argument with the people who look at Bezos and Branson and say, yeah, maybe pay some taxes. Absolutely no argument whatsoever. But the benefit of independent, non-governmental agencies pushing out into space, either orbital or suborbital, will have direct benefits to the rest of society. Do I want those dudes to pay their taxes? Fuck yes, I do. Of course. Bezos especially, being that we have plenty of paper trail on the fact that a lot of his fortune was made by a company that doesn't really pay or respect its employees all that much.
Oh, yeah.
And also, the guy's, he's Mr. Loophole. I mean, in the same way that Musk is. But we will get benefits from this because we have lagged behind in aeronautical development for 30 years.
Look, I am right behind you. I think that this is a good move. I think that it will benefit us. I just was struck by the contrast of bumping up, right against each other, the climate change, the climate crisis. Let's call it what it is. The climate crisis. And who let him think that a giant penis was a cool thing to
So I want to give a shout out. I want to give a shout out to a colleague of mine named Sarah Taylor McFarland. We'll put her stuff up here, Andy.
Yeah.
She's been all over this stuff. She does media studies at Northwestern. And she spends a lot of her time actually looking at the kind of religious dimension of all sorts of weird social pop media stuff. And she's been looking at Elon Musk and these other billionaires launching their explorations, and they all use explicitly religious language.
Oh yeah,
to describe it, and it's like the fact that this last one looked exactly like a giant dildo being launched into space,
unarguably.
And the spaceship looked like a dildo too.
It did.
Sorry,
there's the rim shot. Okay.
But it's like we'll find a good link to some of Sarah's work because she's really been all over.
Fantastic,
this now, and it's pretty whimsically funny stuff. So, and she's really solid.
I think that the touchstones of religion in this are both unmistakable and absolutely intentional, because we're talking about reaching out into the cosmos in a way that we've been trapped by gravity for 2 million years as far as us monkeys go, and breaking those bonds. There's one of the things that I find very interesting is that even people that we would not expect to use that kind of language about this historically have. And you really just need to look at Carl Sagan. But Carl Sagan was coming at it from a different angle in that he was much more anchored in the Joseph Campbell school of seeing these huge archetypes and mythos and using the power of mythos to inspire, which in and of itself is interesting.
The other thing about Carl Sagan and how he talks about, or how he talked about these subjects, he always brought a reminder to it of how humbling all of this is to us. It's not aggrandizing, it's not elevating, it's recognizing really how small we are and how little we know.
Yeah, and how insignificant we are in the grand scheme of things, a la the most famous thing that I think Sagan is known for in that sphere is the pale blue dot. And that, when we finally got that shot of all the planets from Saturn on out in alignment, and just the little arrow going, everybody who has ever lived has done so on this little dot.
Yeah, and I know that video is still on YouTube.
Oh, sure it is.
And it's worth rewatching from time to time because that monologue is, it gives me goosebumps and brings
Sagan
me to tears
at his absolute apex.
Yeah.
I agree.
It really is kind of his masterwork. I don't dispute any of your guys' positions regarding the launches and the benefits that we're going to reap and things of that nature. I think my fundamental concern, the thing that's making me a little nervous right now about all of this, is that previously space exploration was a national thing. The space race was a point of national pride. It was, and I'm not arguing that nationalism is right. Not at all. What I worry about is that I wonder if this is not the expression of emerging corporate nation states. And
that's a danger. I'm not going to argue that, but what's going to fill the vacuum if the will of a nation backs off and allows other nations to supersede it in
China.
That it's kind of a weird balancing act, you know.
I have so my meme for this stuff too, by the way, and sort of picks up a lot of this we were talking about, is starting. So if I got real geeky about this, I would say something like, in 1980, when the Milton Friedman free market cult people finally got control of the U.S. government, one of the things that we really found, one of the things that happened really quickly was that the idea of a public good was displaced for private goods only.
Yeah.
And so in my own case, education stuff, right? University education used to be understood, and it was talked about this way, as a public good. So if we make a lot of people get through high school and stuff, we'll all be better off. And starting around 1980, you started to hear the language where, why should I go to college to make more money?
Yeah.
And so, and then if you accept that as the basis, then people can come along and say, as they have since 1980, well, why should the rest of us pay tax dollars for somebody else's economic benefit? And see what it's like, but it isn't actually for somebody else's economic benefit, it's for all of us. Mm-hmm. But this idea of public good gets displaced by Milton Friedman's version of capitalism, in which the only thing that matters is shareholder value.
And you wind up with the model of commodification ruling the day.
Kennedy didn't get us to the moon for private gain. He did it for the public good.
Right.
And so, like, Chris, you're talking about, the benefits that would accrue. We keep talking about, Teflon and all the good stuff that came, other than Tang. We're not going to talk about Tang.
Tang.
All the other stuff that came out of the Apollo program.
Yeah.
See, those are all public good.
Straight out of the jar.
Right? No, straight out of the envelope, man. Screw the water. Just give me that. That was like a NASA version of pixie sticks in a bag. I tell you what, folks, we're going to take a quick break and we're going to come back with the other news of the day /week/2 weeks. Here on the Narrowband Broadcast Network, I'm Andrew Scott, along with Dr. Mark Peterson up in Door County, Chris down the street, and Robert across town. This is Keep Your Hat On, and we'll be right back. Alexa, play the latest episode of Keep Your Hat On podcast on Amazon Music.
Here's Keep Your Hat On from Amazon Music.
So that's a thing you can do now. And hello and welcome back. This is Keep Your Hat On, the show where hell, even we don't know where we're going to go. And we're going to Door County with Dr. Mark Peterson. We're going down the street to Chris Vicano, and we're going across town to Robert Anthony. And I got a little bit of something that's going to reach back and touch one of the earlier episodes of Keep Your Hat On, where we talked about right to repair. Now, to get everybody who might have missed that episode, and of course that's no one, up to speed, you probably don't have the right to repair many of the things that you own in your home. And this has been a growing movement now for well on 20-some years. Some of the more notable infractions in this realm have to do with things like your computer. Your cell phone is definitely your smartphone, where if you break the screen and you take that cell phone to anybody other than a corporate authorized repairer, you essentially void the warranty on that phone for the life of that. And it goes to other things like software and the inability to get to the boot sector of your computing device or your phone. And this news literally just hit the wire today. It's very nice to see, no matter where you are on the political spectrum, that the President of the United States has actually waded in on this very topic and has issued an executive order earlier this month, July 2021, calling on the Federal Trade Commission to write regulations that would force manufacturers to change their policies and allow what consumer groups call the right to repair. And this is a little bit of big news, that we actually have somebody at the federal level looking down on the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, and saying, we need to do something about this. That's progress that we've needed to see for a long time.
Right. The fact that they're discussing it and they've started the conversation in a very meaningful way, that's huge.
Well, and even bigger than that is that this is top down. This is our nation's top executives saying to the tiers below, we need to address this. And this is really one of the first times that I've heard any discussion of right to repair on the national level outside of the right to repair echo chamber of everybody with a broken iPhone screen going, hey, so there's progress being made. And not only that, again, one of the things that I think people don't understand about right to repair and owning a piece of equipment is that this doesn't just affect people with their handy dandy digital gadgets in their pockets or their hands. This goes to things like farmers owning large multi-$1,000 pieces of equipment who, if they get caught repairing their own equipment, they wind up losing the ability to make a claim. It goes to your car. Our latest fascination in cars now is the move from internal combustion engines over to rechargeable batteries or fuel cells. And, we own a Prius. We own an older Prius. Its batteries are coming up on their life. If we take them to Toyota, the replacement cost of the batteries from Toyota, and by the way, the Toyota battery technology is about 10 years old at this point.
Yeah.
You're talking about replacing the batteries will cost as much as going out and buying a good used version of the same car of a later vintage.
Yeah, you should just go down to Batteries Plus.
But that's the issue right there. There's an uprising of independent battery technologists.
Yeah, there's aftermarket Toyota batteries.
Exactly, that will outperform, that have a higher safety margin. One of the things that happens with the first 2 or 3 year vintage of the Prius, remember when they came out and they actually had skirts over the rear wheels to improve aerodynamics, and the thing looked like an ugly rolling shoe. Those batteries don't just tend to fail, they tend to fail catastrophically. As far as I understand, nobody hold me to that. I'm not going to deal with a lawsuit about my batteries didn't explode. But they do have a lot more problems. Battery technology over the last 10 years has grown in leaps and bounds.
And is going to continue to do so.
And it is definitely going to continue to do so, partly thanks to the space program. Sorry, just saying that out loud. But your ability to make decisions regarding the things you own is still in jeopardy, and it's really only in jeopardy from the corporations that sell you the stuff in the first place. And so any kind of movement forward, and by the way, Mark, what year is your Prius?
2014.
2014. So you got me by, I think,
7 years.
Yeah, because we're 2007, 2008, I think, something like that.
It's in great shape.
Yeah. And again, they're great cars. It's just I don't like to be held at gunpoint when it comes to, well, if you don't do something about this, you don't own a car, you own a brick.
Well, and if you step back and think about it a minute, this is effectively the 20th century version of trust busting.
It absolutely is.
Because when you are presented with a path and you're given one choice to maintain that path, that is the very definition of a monopoly.
Yeah, it's the old joke that you have 3 options. First one is no options. The second one is the same as the first, and the third one is no options again.
Yeah, well, this is really works out well, right? Because to reach back and touch another episode.
Ooh, reaching and touching.
Yeah, I just I liked that. I liked the imagery there. But with remember when you were in a past episode, we were talking about obsolescence.
Same episode.
And is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then I'm not reaching back and touching.
Just gonna say, glad to see you're keeping up with the show flow.
Well, but what was I going to say? Oh, the obsolescence and the fact that you're being held at gunpoint is exactly to what Chris is talking about.
Yeah,
and they got you right where they want you,
and they baked it into the bread. I mean, they've
been doing it. Yeah,
and like your example with the Prius, where replacing the batteries makes less financial sense than
replacing the entire car.
Vehicle.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So what happens to the old vehicle? There's environmental impacts right there. I mean, our throwaway society is something that we really desperately need to address.
Well, and the environmental impact is actually greater with a car like that because instead of just cast iron and steel that can be squished into 1/3 its beginning size, you have things like lithium and, much more lead and contaminant metals going into the environment. I remember actually reading that you're not supposed to, if you trash your Prius in a crash, Toyota America was starting a program, whether or not it still exists, I don't know, but they would come and take your car from you instead of it going to either a boneyard or a crusher, because they were starting to get looked at side-eye wise because of the environmental impact of trashing one of those cars. It's different than it is with old technology.
Well, yeah, and properly disposing of those old cars is a whole different kettle of fish, as you pointed out. I mean, you've got to recapture those chemicals.
And I think that was actually another part of it that was invisible with the Toyota America thing, trying to get a hold of those cars, is they were trying to keep some of their technology from being put under the microscope and repurposed into other places. Because there's still a huge movement in sheds and garages in America of electrifying cars. And there are a number of actually kind of quietly famous tinkerers here in Oregon who have EV'd their things like Ford Fiestas, but then they take them out to the drag strip. And I'll see if I can't find find some of this footage. Oh my God! Where some side hat wearing muscle dude or somebody in a drift car or something puts themselves up against this little Fiesta or this Yugo.
These are electric
Yugo.
They're all electric.
We gotta find the landfill where all the Yugos are.
And you just watch this tiny little Matchbox looking car up against this big, sleek muscle car thing, and it's just boom and gone. And that V8 with the Hemi and the hood scoop, and it's just left in the dust.
It's all that weight.
Well, that's part of it, yeah.
I'm wondering, because I've been kind of seeing this on the horizon, or at least I think I am. I think we're really coming to a point where the government, where the consumer, where there's going to be starting a crackdown and maybe a breakup of all these really strong companies, at least a reining in. Do you think that this is part of that?
I think it's very complimentary as far as the move of the public goes too. We're kind of, we scream up and down about America, freedom, and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And I've always been baffled by what willingness the American public has to not be free, or where it's okay to be told that you can't do something.
Right.
Right. Mark, what's your take on that? Why do we all really like our freedom but yet we give it away in such weird places sometimes.
So, oh dear. Well, hey, let me say.
Sorry, he's adjusting. Getting lined up.
Oh shit!
Hey, let me give you the short version of this. This is a topic. This is a topic that shows up in Plato's Republic. I am not making this up. Not about America, because there wasn't one yet.
Right. Wow.
And I'm gonna boil this down really to like the bumper sticker level of this. The first thing is that what Americans call freedom isn't actual freedom. That's the first.
Thank you for that.
Not real freedom.
No.
I love doing this in class because I'll say, what does it mean to be free in America? And everybody goes, doing what you want.
Right.
And then I'll say, which part of your soul, in Plato, there's three parts of your soul. You got your intellect, emotions, appetites. He says, which part of your soul does the wanting? It's like appetites. And so in America, freedom is really nothing but slavery to your appetites.
Yep.
That would be, and I'm just quoting Plato on this, by the way, which tickles me to no end. So, but it's like, yeah, it's just free. It's not a freedom at all. Freedom requires your ability to choose to do one thing rather than another, right? So, Andy, you're saying, do we choose to give up our freedoms? We're not making any choices at all.
True.
Right?
Yeah.
Because which part of you makes choices? And the answer is, I don't know. My appetites never made a damn choice in their existence except one, which is more.
Yeah.
Right.
And so it's your intellect that makes the choices. It's certainly not. It's not your heart, and it's not your appetites. So we have this confusion about what freedom even is. And so all these people complaining about, well, what about my freedom? It's like, you mean your willingness to give in to whatever appetite is ruling you at the moment? You mean that one?
Yeah. Or your ability, your willingness to choose between three different versions of the same advertisement and the same call to action.
But they're not actually making
it's a different color.
Like they're just looking at the color of the toothpaste.
Yeah,
too.
exactly right.
Oh, this one's red. Look. So that's the real problem. And by the way, I urge you guys to test drive this on people when they say, "Well, I want my freedom," and just say, "You're not free. You're just enslaved to your appetites," and just watch what happens.
Don't worry about it. We do that all the time in Zen Buddhism, and it's really.
I think around the Zendo that will be really, really well contemplated and accepted.
Yeah,
I think
I'm afraid I might get my nose broke if I take it out into the street.
I was just going to say, I'm not going to do that to most of my people because I like friends.
Yeah. You don't want to do this.
I've been locked away for so long.
Look, you know what? I don't force banjo playing or ukulele playing on my friends, and I never.
Let's play the banjo. On second thought, I'll play the banjo. It'd be too confusing if we all got up here.
And I never force philosophy on them either.
Yeah, it's a quick way to be shown the door.
There's a shirt that was
that's all I
pedal
got.
faster. I think I hear banjos.
Right. Don't bark at the banjos, man. That's I will defend banjos in the same way I will defend bagpipes. They speak to my soul if I had one.
I am not going
two
to...
more shout-outs while I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, do.
One, the Yugos thing. I hadn't thought about that in years. Did we all see the movie Drowning Mona?
No.
Oh, my God. You want to see this movie.
Okay.
Drowning Mona. Danny DeVito plays a town sheriff investigating the murder of Bette Midler.
Oh, well, I know what I'm doing this weekend.
Really great.
I'm grabbing my popcorn for that.
Drowning Mona. Trust me.
Okay.
Trust me. And then the other one is now fell out of my head completely. What else were we talking about?
I don't know, man. It must be the Door County air.
It's the Door County thing, man.
Well, I tell you what, everybody, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back on the other side of this, we're going to talk about a certain effect and how it might also maybe play in a little bit to what we were just discussing. Can I be more Let's see. No, I can't. Anyways, I'm Andrew Scott. That's Dr. Mark Peterson. That's Chris Vicano. And that's Robert Anthony. We're the Hats. This is Keep Your Hat On. And we will be right back. Don't go anywhere.
And here we go. Oh, I just broke my ring. Yep.
And welcome back to Keep Your Hat On, the show where hell even we don't know we're going to go. I'm Andrew Scott. That's Dr. Mark Peterson. That's Robert Anthony. And that's Chris Vicano. And this here podcast is sponsored in part by the Chilling app. Now, the Chilling app is an app on your phone, either your iPhone or your Android phone, that allows you to listen to scary stories in order to help you fall asleep. It is a more intense way to relax, and I, full disclosure, am one of the voices of Chilling app. I'm very proud to be affiliated with them, and starting this week, you can listen to me read you the original version of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, or as I pronounce it properly, Frankenstein. Because put all the jokes in at this point. But definitely do check out.
They were wrong, weren't they?
Yeah, do check out the Chilling app. It is a fantastic platform with a bunch of great narrators and a bunch of great stories. And one of the things that they're concentrating on that I really like is they are bringing short stories from independent authors who wouldn't normally get published. So in the canon of horror fiction and horror writing, you're hearing a lot of fresh voices, and you're hearing a lot of people who, as writers, have been historically underrepresented. And so do check out the Chilling app. You can check them out by going to thechillingapp.com and download the app today.
It's one of the most.
It can be treacherous.
that scene and the scene where they do the Ritz,
right?
Put on the Ritz.
Put on the Ritz.
I tell you right now,
it's still great.
I laugh so hard I cry, even though I know what's coming. It just makes me just. The little boy comes out. It
does.
And honestly, I feel compelled to call a moment of silence for Marty Feldman because.
My favorite line in the whole movie is that scene at the beginning where they're at the train station and Gene Wilder's just gone off the train and he pats him, Marty Feldman, on the shoulder. He goes, "Oh, I beg your pardon." He says, "I'm a rather brilliant surgeon.
Right.
Take care of the hump." And there's this pause. He goes, "What hump?"
What hump?
and Gene Wilder does this take with his eyes and he goes,
Yeah.
That was the magic of Wilder, is there were few actors on Earth who were able to act so much while saying nothing
Just with a
and
facial
just
expression.
a facial expression, or even just his eyes. He could just narrow his eyes a tiny little bit, and it's worth 10 lines worth of dialogue.
That scene in Willy Wonka, where they're going down the river.
Yep.
That is really. Gene Wilder scares the shit out of you.
I was just going to say, for people in our generation, I mean, Mark, you were of age back then, but I'm sure it was still a fun, trippy thing. But
fuck yes,
that was fucking traumatic. That scene. Are you kidding me?
Yeah. Well, that whole movie was pretty damn disturbing.
You know, it's really funny that we're bringing this up, and I'll edit this together because now we're back into good content. I was reading an article today about just how dangerous and nasty it was for those kids to film that movie.
Oh yeah.
And particularly the scene with Augustus Gloop when he falls into the chocolate river. I didn't realize up until I was today years old when I learned that the chocolate river was honestly a chocolate river. It was water filled with cocoa powder and dried milk. And, you know, you'd think, well, okay, at least, hey, the kid's going to be able to swim around in something fun for a little bit. No, he wound up being in there for like 8 hours. They had to do take after take after take. And then a couple days later, they had to do it all again. Well, the problem with that was after the first day, the chocolate milk started to ferment and spoil. And there was a habit of the crew to dump their unfinished coffee into the river.
Why not?
Yeah, exactly. To the point where this thing was curdling while the kid was in it.
He got a mouthful and was sick for days.
I was just going to say, and having just gotten
ate chocolate for the rest of his life.
Probably so. Not. You would think something like that. But anyways, we're going to move on here to our next little bit. Chris, you said that you had something to bring to the table today, and what is das thing?
Yeah, this springboards really nicely off of the conversation that we just finished up about right to repair, and that is I've noticed a term becoming more frequently, appearing more frequently in places that I read, and the term is the Diderot effect.
Can you give us a backstory on who Diderot is before we push forward?
Yeah, absolutely. So Denis Diderot was a how would you characterize him? Kind of a writer, social critic.
Yeah.
A bit of a philosopher, but not like a classical philosopher.
Like a real philosopher.
He was a bit in the vein of like Voltaire.
Yeah. Social commentary and criticism.
Yeah, social commentary in the 18th
Famous
century.
atheist.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's primarily where I know him from is
exactly.
his
So we should link down below.
Link down below.
Yeah. He wrote an essay called Regrets on Parting with My Old Dressing Gown.
We need to update that. You need to write a new version of that.
Yeah, get on that, Chris.
I will.
Yeah.
In it, he explores the effects of this extravagant purple dressing gown that Catherine the Great gave to him in 1765 in exchange for his library. And, when I dug up that little nugget, I'm like, who on earth would trade their library? I mean, there are a few things I get really tweaked about.
Well, that's something you and I share is don't fuck with my books.
Books are precious. Mm-hmm. Who gives up their books for some pajamas? It's like, but
they were purple.
I was just gonna say they might have been the pajama to end all pajamas.
It's true.
Never know.
So he explores the effects, and at first he's really happy about this dressing gown, and then he realizes all his other possessions seem dull and tawdry, and
really
they're sort of eclipsed by the beauty of the dressing gown. So he replaces his chair and his bed linens and his desk, and pretty soon he drives himself into debt trying to
compliment a nightgown.
Yeah, trying to bring his possessions up to the level of that nightgown. that dressing gown.
Somebody needs medication.
And so he speaks to the trap of sort of consumerism and sort of how it works, where you get you get a new item and it affects the items around it, and you start rethinking those. Ty, several episodes back, you were talking about a new couch.
Here we are reaching around and touching another episode.
Touching the same episode again.
and yeah, we talked a bit about, new end tables, new curtains, new coffee table. It's similar phenomena. So the Diderot effect, I dug into it a bit, as a term. It was coined by an anthropologist named Grant McCracken in 1988 in a book that he wrote called Culture and Consumption, New Approaches to the Symbolic Character of Consumer Goods. They never make their titles short.
No. Short equals boring.
Yeah, so it was first coined in 88. It was picked up again in 1982 by a sociologist and economist named Juliet Schor. And she wrote a book called The Overspent American, Why We Want What We Don't Need. And then she circled back around to it in 2005 and wrote an essay called Learning Diderot's Lesson. And that's where she tied consumerism, and particularly American consumerist attitudes, to environmental impacts, the great throwaway, the disposable society. And really, the term is frequently used today among, in discussions of minimalism, simplifying your life, those kind of movements, and sustainable and green consumerism. And the whole thing has just sort of stuck in my head, and I'm thinking about, and I'm thinking about our earlier conversation, this part of it is actually facilitated by these companies that get you into this trap, get you onto this hamster wheel of, you got an iPhone and it's a great device until it's not, because they've upgraded the software so much and they've put out more generations, and sooner or later you've got to break down and replace it.
Oh, and that points interestingly to something that I've kind of watched from the sideline, and that's what's referred to as iterative design. And iterative design is the practice of always making the next version be subtly different from the last.
Yeah, different color.
Exactly, and it's something as simple as color, or something as simpler as, the line, because it radios to the world that your thing is the newest and greatest. But
this thing goes up to 11.
Exactly. Even if something is essentially the same, its outward view of being different and more current is it's its own cachet. It's its own reason for being, and it drives so much of the market. Not only here, but around the world. You get into other nations like India. The turnover of cell phones in India is off the charts. It's also interesting that most electronic waste winds up in India. Yeah. And I mean, literally mountains of old computers and electrical parts where the poor of India make a living going in, ripping these things apart, sometimes with their bare hands, not even with so much as a screwdriver. And they will pull out and they will literally take the gold endings off of chips en masse in order to harvest that microscopic little bit of gold. And actually, this does all go back to Diderot and the effect in that we're still, not only are we still, I think we are more susceptible to that than ever in this world. And part of it has to do with, like you were saying, Chris, the invisible impact that a lot of these things, and not only these things, but this way of life, we're all hooked into.
Well, and Grant McCracken really delves into this in his book, that what's happened is somewhere along the way, there's been a shift in our thinking about the objects that we buy, that they have become part of our identity. They've become an expression of our identity. And so as those objects change, it becomes a display of identity and status. And to connect that up for a second to something else, towards the end of last semester, my son was in an economics class, and we were watching an economics video and sort of discussing it. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that the guy on the video was talking about was, truly wealthy people, in general, they're smart with their money. They tend to save it. They tend to hold on to it. They don't get into, especially when you're building wealth, you don't display, you don't go out and spend it on a big fancy car until like that big fancy car is not a hard expenditure. Right. And the ultimate example of that is, I recall we used to marvel back in the 90s at Sam Walton and the fact that he drove a beat up pickup truck, wore the same, denim shirt
over and over and over again. Yeah.
Battered cowboy hat. And he didn't feel the need to make that excessive display of his wealth. And yet so many Americans now, particularly with like influencer culture, they spend to and oftentimes beyond their own limits to present this image of success and high identity, and wind up getting themselves, pretty deep into trouble.
It's the phenomena that the nouveau riche always want you to think that they're the riche. The riche don't give a fuck.
Does this plug back into the, one of the weird things that's stuck in my head over the last few years is that one of the major growth industries in the United States is storage compartments.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
I wonder, I would be interested, and let's all do a little bit of digging. I would be interested to know the difference between nations. Is like, storage facilities. Is that a thing in, like, I don't know, the Netherlands? Or is it really an American phenomena that we actually have an entire industry built up around little boxes where you can store all your extraneous shit?
Well, and that's one of the odd things, right? You get somebody touting that they're minimalist, but they've got 3 storage units.
Right. Yeah. Marie Kondo is telling you to clean up your stuff, and you just move your stuff somewhere else where it's not in view of your camera. Or people who have that one room in their house to do their video call so that it looks Marie Kondo, but then everything outside that door is just an absolute
stacks of newspaper.
It looks like an episode of Hoarders.
Mark, what were you saying, Mark?
Yeah, well, this gets to what Chris was saying too. It's like if you watch an episode of Marie Kondo, right, that she's done on TV. She's done her shows, right?
Yeah.
This all to me goes back to like fetish capitalism, which is what you're talking about here. Is you identify with the things, and so our idea of our personal value depends on how many things we buy. And the reason that's a fetish is because it's a replacement for what we actually need, which is like a real life.
Yep.
But not just owning stuff. But if you look at Marie Kondo's shows, what always struck me was watching people cry as they went through their stuff to give it away, right? And you could see them. She has the whole process ritualized, right, to make it possible for people to, does this spark joy, right?
Right.
And when you give it away, you actually are supposed to say thank you, and then you put it in the goodwill pile, right?
Yeah.
And it's like watching people go through that psychological trauma, and all these shows about hoarders and stuff now, right? On whatever channel it's on. But you know what I'm talking about here. And watching, anyway, I'm just thinking this goes back to Chris, I think, that, if you think about the psychological trauma, that you can actually find evidence of that all over the media these days.
Well, sure, because, in those situations, you're not just unloading stuff, you're deconstructing your own identity. Yeah. And that is traumatic, and that is scary. And I think in general, people are, as a self-preservation sort of exercise, we're not inclined to go into that space easily, right? We're it's not easy for us to tear ourselves apart and rebuild ourselves.
Well, I think it's also kind of interesting too, in that, the thing that Kondo is trying to portray in the giving away of the thing, and it's always done on camera with just the right angle, is the idea of catharsis. And I think that there's a confusion that happens that they very carefully edit, because, like you were just saying, Chris, a lot of what you're seeing on these people's faces is not catharsis. I mean, if you want a real example of catharsis, you go to Poetics by Aristotle. That's really where, in my mind, catharsis, the reality of catharsis, happens. What you're seeing in these people is trauma. And trauma is different from catharsis.
That's good. That's really good.
Mm-hmm. It's the difference between giving something away and being forced to let go of something when you aren't ready because the cameras are rolling.
Right.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's that mother culture whispering in your ear that you are what you own instead of what you do.
And I'm losing a part of me.
That stuff is status, stuff is love, stuff is happiness.
Stuff is greater than its simple stuffness. Yeah. I'm absolutely certain one of the things I want to see is I want to see the guys from the Ghost Discovery stories. I want to see them break into Mary Kondo's basement because I imagine there's plenty of fucking dirt there. Tell you what, everybody, we're going to take another quick break and we're going to be right back here on the Narrowband Broadcast Network. That's Robert Anthony. That's Christopher Vacano. That's Mark Peterson in Door County, right? And I'm Andrew Scott here in Portland, Oregon. This is Keep Your Hat On. We'll be right back. The madness continues. Good. And welcome back here for the final segment of Keep Your Hat On, at least for this episode. I'm Andrew Scott, along with Dr. Mark Peterson and Chris Vacano and Robert Anthony. And we're going to wrap this show up with a little bit of advice from Rob about, well, something that we here at Keep Your Hat On don't really ascribe to all that much because we say plenty of shit to each other that we probably should just keep inside our heads. But Rob, what do you got here?
Let's talk about things never to say to anybody ever. I mean, these are those slogans, these phrases that just get under your skin. And I got six of them to start us out with.
Okay, and this we'll be linking to the original article down below here, but press on.
Most of these, by the way, are an uncomfortable way to somebody who's uncomfortable with the situation.
Oh, fill in space.
And hasn't quite fit together that there's a difference between empathy and sympathy.
Ah, okay.
And some of these are a little bit toxic sympathy, or examples of toxic sympathy. So
put up a warning underneath here, Andrew.
Right? Yeah, flashing. It's flashing now. See that?
And so some of these are I get that these are bad. My worst ones are not on this list, but let's talk about that later.
Go for it.
First one is everything happens for a reason.
Oh, you hit my one of my number ones right off the top.
Yeah. Wow.
Again, toxic sympathy.
Yeah.
Simple. That person that is saying that is uncomfortable with the situation, doesn't understand how to empathize, and is ill-heartedly trying to lift somebody up.
To me, it always feels like deflection.
Yeah. It seems like a comfortable, canned, and totally inauthentic response.
Yeah, I have nothing constructive to say, and I have no way to comfort you, so I'm just going to throw it up to the gods.
And that is basically sympathy. Sympathy is, and we can link down below there. There's a great 3 to 5 minute YouTube video on the difference between empathy and sympathy. But basically, sympathy is when you're looking down at somebody.
Right.
When you are trying to elevate yourself above them, but you don't know how to console them. Mm-hmm. Empathy is when you get down in the muck with them.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The second one is it could be worse. Right?
Yeah.
What the
why?
Well, thanks a pant load, Chet.
Yeah. Why would you? Somebody's got cancer. Well, it could be worse.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, geez, Louise.
Yeah, leave that one out of any discussion.
Oh, yeah. Oh, these are all really
I'm
terrible,
sorry I cut you off, Ty. Go ahead.
Terribly minimizing. Mm-hmm. And some of them are, you're right, Andy, some of these are very deflective.
Yeah.
And really try to take the oxygen out of the room and put the attention someplace else.
Or back on the person who's suffering.
Yes.
Thanks. Yeah.
Here's a little salt. Right?
Yeah, would you like some vinegar with that too? Yeah.
Everything is going to be all right is the third one. Woof. Again, just
not beige statement.
Yeah, it really
is. Doesn't belong. But everything is going to be all right. Might be okay. This one might be okay if it is qualified.
Yeah, that's about context, because you and I are in a spiritual practice where if you strip everything away, that's kind of what we say often. But just lobbing it out there without even having it delivered musically a la Bob Marley.
That's where I was going.
Yeah, it just feels like I got nothing to say here, so I'm just going to say something pat in order to take up space.
I think most of these come from somebody just being unaware that they're uncomfortable with hearing somebody else's woes and not knowing how to see or just be with that person.
Yeah, and that goes back to the whole thing of never ask anybody how they're doing. Unless you really want to know.
Really want to hear it.
Yeah, because the one time somebody actually gives you a full-on honest answer, you are going to be Mr. or Mrs. or MX uncomfortable.
I got to be quite known in the Zen circles where you don't ask me.
Yeah.
If you're going to ask me, I'm going to
give it to you.
I'm not going to.
You're going to hear about my bowel movement this morning, and it's not going to be pretty.
Yeah, it might be.
Well, I don't know. Don't take any pictures.
Before you go to the
Roses.
next one, I think
Chris.
It also comes from a hesitance and maybe a fear to actually connect with another person's pain.
I think that's very accurate.
Which is what empathy is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Empathy is being willing to experience the suffering or joy of somebody else. And actually, both of those things can be a very scary proposition.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's the literal meaning of compassion, which means to suffer with. So,
yes, exactly, and that points to the next one. I'm sorry. That points to the word passion, which we'll actually word salad at some point in the future, and we'll probably have to do a whole show on that one. Thanks, Kierkegaard. Anyways,
number four on the list. I didn't mean it like that.
Oh, that is, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't mean it. Now that's a textbook example of a deflective statement,
and it holds hands, unfortunately, very well with something that drives me nuts, which is, I didn't mean you to take it that way, or you didn't need to take it that way.
That wasn't my intention.
Right, exactly. Then what was?
It puts all the responsibility on the
receiver.
On the receiver for how they and it's like, I've used that wasn't my intention, but then I will follow up and explain what my intention was. So I've been guilty of it. I'll cop to using that one in the past. I generally try to expand on the thought and say, this is what I was trying to communicate, and I did it poorly.
Yeah.
I think these are all examples of. I think these are all examples. I mean, I know that when I can't stop these words from coming out of my mouth, I cringe. I cringe when I hear myself say it.
Yeah.
What's the next one?
The next one, you should, and then you insert the instruction, right? Ooh. Nobody likes good advice. No one likes to be told how to live their life.
Yep.
And we live in a world of shoulds and oughts.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you can shit all over yourself if you're not careful.
Wait. Oh, there's the rim shot and the laughter. Okay, yeah.
Frank said it first, but okay.
Number 6 is you need to move on.
Right.
You should never be saying that to somebody. No. That is just totally dismissive. And
that is the definition of a dick move.
Yeah.
Besides, you can't move on. Remember, things go with you forever.
Yeah.
How dare anybody presume to know the appropriate length for someone else's process?
Yeah.
Exactly. And so that's the list that's in the article. For me, personally, somebody telling me to relax.
Oh, yeah.
Or to calm down.
Yeah.
I got a whole story behind that. I really realized that. I had been taught not to say that in social services.
Oh.
But I had that thrown at me in a dire ER experience that really brought that home. Right? I don't like hearing the word, even if I'm driving in the car, my partner says relax. That just pisses me off.
Do you think that has something to do with the fact that your spiritual practice is all about being centered and in the moment, and that actually is a pointer to you, the person with you perceiving that you're not?
I tend to lean into the semantics of it. I'm okay with gently being reminded that I need to come back and that I need to be present, and I'm maybe not present. But being told to relax is generally when somebody is going to say that when you're already elevated.
Yeah.
And that doesn't help. It's just not a help.
I agree.
No, it winds you up further. What I was going to ask is, how do you feel about alternative ways of expressing the underlying idea? So if somebody were to tell you, hey, take a beat and think about this. Is that?
Yeah, no, that's acceptable. That's acceptable.
I will say that I will receive that better than being told to relax, because being told to relax insinuates that I'm spun up. And I don't know, to me, that bit there kind of feels like a judgment. Mark, I got to ask you, if you had to come up with an addition to this list, what would one of yours be?
To me, they always devolve around. This has been my experience. They always come back to some sort of should, actually. That's why I had the joke waiting.
Yeah.
It's like, one of the weird things, I started to do this. So back in my early days when I was looking at Zen and Tai Chi and doing all these kind of, internal stuff, and you start to uncover all of the crap.
Yes.
One of the weird changes I made and I still do this to this day, by the way, was whenever I would say I should really go do something, I would stop myself. This, even when I thought it, I trained myself to stop thinking and go, okay, will I do it or won't I do it? And the reason for this was, I remember, it's like people would ask you to go out for a beer. This is when I was in school. And it was like, I really should go home and work on that paper. Now, what would happen then is, this is why the shoulds are so bad. What would happen then is, if I did go home and worked on the paper, I didn't really get any joy out of it because it was something I should do. Right? And if I didn't do it, then I should have done it, and I get the guilt. But
I was just going to say,
fabulous bookends, yeah.
Should statements are actually guilting statements,
right? But what I found was really interesting was, so if I changed the language from the ouds, should, could, would, ought, to whether I was actually going to do it or not. This has a little Earhart seminar training action to it, which I can't stand, but it sounds like that. But if I changed it to will or won't, here's what happened next was, okay, this paper has to be finished tomorrow, but my friends want me to go out and have a beer for a few hours. So if I did that, I'd have to write the paper from about 1 a.m. to 6 a.m.
With a beer buzz.
Right. And but see, if you decide, am I going to do it or not? If you go, well, I'm going to go have the beer, then you take full responsibility for the action.
Yeah.
And then there's no shoulds involved. And so it's people go, well, you should have done it. It's like, well, whatever. I didn't do it. Yeah. And so it sucks. Done.
I made the choice.
There you go.
And it's like, I think it had this really weird psychological relief for me. So to this day, I try never to say should. And it's like a lot of the stuff Robert was those were great. That's an awesome list.
It really was good.
And it's like, I think a lot of those kind of devolve down to the shoulds, right? You should do this.
And
what's interesting is the other stuff you guys brought up, I think, was the stuff about, that's actually about the person saying it, not about what they're looking at. Right?
Yeah, which invariably is how it winds up. So.
In an addendum to this, I would also, something that I relatively recently learned, is that you should avoid why questions that begin with why. What you're doing when you ask a why question is generally going to be a judging statement. The person's going to feel like something's wrong and is going to immediately go into a defensive stance.
Yeah.
At which point you are not going to have a constructive process.
No, and it's always better.
That's the first thing you can never ask.
Right.
You can never say, why do you feel that way? You can say, how did it happen that?
How did you land to that?
Or what's
That's really interesting,
this?
Robert.
Yeah, because why always brings up defense, and it always leaves the door open for excuses and rationalizations. Asking how did you come to think that? How did you wind up where you are? That invites a person to tell you about their own personal experience, which is always better traction.
Yeah, it opens the door for empathy. You're going to have a conversation that is curious and empathetic.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we are definitely getting the why of Door County over the right shoulder here, and I think that is our invitation to shut this fucker down and go live our lives. Again, everybody, we are very grateful that you decided to tune in with us for this episode. This is officially our 10th episode, so happy mini birthday to us.
Wow.
But again, we'd also like to point you out to our merchandise shop, because we want to give you superfluous shit to collect and have trouble giving away in order to clean out your life. So do us a favor.
About yourself if you buy this.
I agree, exactly. And everybody will envy you. And
buy this and be somebody.
And then 2 days after you buy that, we'll change a color and make sure that it's the most contemporary color. I think we're all headed towards.
Coming back.
We're all headed towards periwinkle. But you can get our stuff and support the podcast by heading over to our web store, which is kyhopodcast.com/shop, or you can just help us on Patreon by supporting us through there with a tiny little monthly donation. I need to put on my NPR voice there. But you can head over to patreon.com/NBBN and support the show that way, or if you're tight on cash and you just want to use your finger, hit like, click, and subscribe down below, and make sure that you tell your friends about the show. But gosh, people, we've done it again. You have wasted more fabulous time here with us, the guys from the Keep Your Hat On podcast. I'm Andrew Scott. That's Robert Anthony. That's Chris Vicano. And that is the vacationing Dr. Mark Peterson. And we will see you again next time on Keep Your Hat On, because we may end up miles from here. Thanks a lot, folks. Everybody take care. Get your shot. Keep wearing your mask. and help out your fellow man, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye, everybody.
Well, there's a chunk of time you can't get back. From Portland, Oregon, this has been Keep Your Hat On, a big little show about a whole lot of nothing in particular. Keep Your Hat On is a narrowband broadcast network production in association with PodSquadPDX.com. Andrew Scott, executive producer. Robert Anthony and Chris Vacano, associate producers. Our theme music was written and produced by Andrew Scott, along with help from Ron Kajawa. Website design and maintenance by Vacano Creative, Chris Vacano Webmaster, available at vacanocreative.com. Audio and video production by Andrew Scott, available at andrewscottmedia.com. Got ideas or comments for the show? Email us at talkback@kyhopodcast.com, and don't forget to like, click, and subscribe. On behalf of the boys, I'm your announcer, Michael Brumage. Thanks for listening. I guess. Hannibal's a cannibal and he's okay. He chops all night and he cooks all day. He cuts down the insolent and eats his lunch, liver and fava beans. On Wednesdays he goes shopping and has garlic toes for tea.
NBBN.
The Narrowband Broadcast Network.
The focus is on you.